All right, and I imagine people will continue to join in. That's fine. So welcome everyone to our workshop on Conь. And Stepan, you are connected. Will we see your face today?
I completely look. It's unfortunate because I'm wearing a beautiful light blue suit jacket and a red tie with dots. My computer camera isn't working. I'm gonna see if I can connect from my phone, but for now you'll just have to hear me and imagine what I look like.
Okay.
I even shaved recently.
The phone should work fine.
Yeah, I don't have the app. Does it work in browser on a phone, or do I need to install Zoom?
I think you have to download the app.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever done it without the app on the phone.
Okay, well, for now, I'm just going to talk. If Louis, do you have anything to say before I get started?
Let me just give a little bit of introduction here. So,
Please.
First of all, news everybody. We now have over 2,000 views of the Shenharvanam recording that we did. And in addition, there were 3,000 plus views of the overall concert, of which we were #1 act. So that counts as over 5,000 views from around the world, people who have been viewing our virtual recordings, which is very exciting. It's great to get comments from Georgia and other places, but it really suggests that because we've got people around the world looking at what we're doing, we need to be sure that we sound like we know what we're doing. So that's why we organized this workshop. And our goal here is for people to come away to have an understanding of the resources available for studying the material, and also to have a good understanding of the piece and what it means to Russians and what we need to convey. If we do that successfully, we will win over a nice Russian audience, I believe. So, Stepan is on the line. He'll be telling us first about the song, the background, what it means, and then Ben will go into the details of how to pronounce it so that we sound more genuine. And then Stepan will give us some guidance in terms of how he wants us to perform the piece. So Stepan, over to you. What are we singing about here in this song?
Sorry, here I am. That wasn't quite enough time for me to install the app on my phone and everything, so I will just be audio for now. Let's see. Well, first, if anybody has questions as I go through this or at the end, please ask. I'm sure that we could have an interesting discussion about all sorts of aspects of this song. It was written and performed in 1994 by a rock group called Yale. But the most popular recording of Yale doing this song is actually a cappella. They're sort of a folk rock group. Other of their songs that are popular, one is called Birches, Biryozy, and the lyrics go something like, why do the birches sound as when the wind rustles through the leaves? Why do they sound so beautiful in Russia? What's so special about them? Why do I feel so nostalgic when the leaves fall in the fall, and when my old mother waves goodbye to me at the little gate as I'm leaving the village? And many of their songs are in a similar vein. They have to do with something that's special about Russia, something that's special about the countryside. Often that's sort of what makes Russia special for them, and some sort of folk motif. And so this is no exception. And many people, not everyone, but many people even in Russia have no idea that this psalm is by this group. People who just have sort of heard it think that it's a folk, maybe a Cossack psalm that is just popular. But it was written in 1994. I think everybody knows the lyrics. It's about going out with your horse right before dawn and seeing the stars, and then getting on the horse and riding to see where the sun rises at the edge of the steppe. 1994 is a very important year. It's one of the worst years of the post-Soviet collapse. Things probably got a little bit worse in 95 and 96 even. Things weren't as bad in 91, 92, but I mean, 94 was really pretty bad. I was just home for Thanksgiving and I was talking to my father. Somebody at church had said a few weeks back that, you know, despite how bad it got, this person was from Moscow, and, you know, all the lines and the stores were empty. They told me, well, you could still get food, you know, nobody was going hungry. And I sort of mentioned that to my dad, who was not in Moscow, he was in the provinces, and he laughed pretty bitterly, I think, and said, you know, that person, you know, was in the capital city, but they don't know what they're talking about. And my mother had been in Russia in 94 too, actually, in Kostroma, in Ulyanovsk, in Kazan, in reasonably far-flung places, but no more far-flung than where I am today in Salt Lake City. You know, that sort of places that are kind of on the periphery, but not the middle of nowhere. And people ended up on the street. People ended up hungry. My father's aunt, last time I went to visit her, talked about trying to raise her only son. Her husband had left. She was not getting paid, even though she had a government job, which was one of the few. She was working as a secretary for the KGB, and they would end up paying her eventually, but there was a pay freeze for some time. And she would go hungry for several days at a time to make sure that her son had something to eat. And she only had one kid. Many people had 3 or 4 or more. And really didn't do well. And so in this context of food insecurity, obviously a civilizational collapse, which was a collapse of values as much as anything else, a collapse of the idea of what it meant to be a Soviet person, of what it meant to live in a superpower, in one of the big 2 superpowers, and suddenly overnight, it wasn't even clear that Russia as a nation was going to survive with the borders the way they were. All of the values people had grown up with, everything that they believed, whether they had believed it sincerely or not, whether even they'd been dissidents or not, all of that collapsed and left a big mental vacuum. And much of the alcoholism that, yes, had started to really characterize the late Soviet Union, but it was incredibly exacerbated by this collapse of values, and really importantly, the collapse of the ability for a man to feed his family at that time, which caused, you know I still have my great-grandmother alive, and I've seen her many times, but I don't know any of the men on my side of the family because they all died of alcoholism along the way. So against this backdrop, in 1994, a relatively new rock group, writes a song about a horse, and it has some significance that continues to this day. One of them is it's attempting to define what this new nation is going to look like. This very old, but also in some ways new nation. What does it stand for? And what is it that we're trying to find? And that's why there's this refrain, I'm in love with you, Russia, I'm in love. It's a sort of reassertion, well, we don't have the Soviet Union anymore. You couldn't have said as easily, I'm in love with you, Russia, I'm in love in the Soviet time, even though they were fairly Russocentric. But it wasn't about that, you know. But now that the Soviet Union's gone, we have to find some sort of nationhood again. And that's part of this. The most important part to me, I think, is the key change at the end that says there will be a new harvest, or there will be a new harvest next year. And that's, I think, there's a reason that feels like the peak of the psalm, the apex of the psalm. It's because that's the most important. It's a message of hope that no matter what happens, the stars are still there, the sunrise is still there, the steppe is still there, and next year there will be a new harvest, and we will get through this. It's almost the equivalent of we shall overcome for this particular period in Russia's history. And people still love this psalm a lot. When we sang it in Russia at all of our concerts, you would see people crying in the audience, and they reacted to it in a way that wasn't really comparable to the other music that we sang. We were in a church, and again, it's not this group has I don't know, come under criticism by some Slavic historians, people who most people don't care, but now and then you'll get somebody, including sort of liberals in Russia, who, you know, this group is a favorite of Putin's. He likes their music, supposedly. I mean, I don't think he has a lot of time to listen to music because they're patriotic. They are proud of their country, but it's a song. I mean, I had a friend, Lance, who was in the chorus, who went to Ukraine, to Western Ukraine, to volunteer to help restore some of the villages that had been bombed, and rebuild a sort of Habitat for Humanity thing. And he said he had a story of going up to a bus stop and just hearing Ukrainians singing this song, because even though it's specifically about Russia, the meta content of the psalm, which is just a message of hope for the post-Soviet world that needs to somehow find meaning and believe that there is going to be a new harvest, that really holds true and resonates for everyone. And the last thing that I was going to say is, yes, that there was one particular concert I remember, a very old church in Moscow, with a lot of really interesting people. This was last summer, the summer before that on our tour. I know there had been some dissidents there who had marched, there was that wave of protests and then very quick arrests 2 summers ago. And many of the parishioners had been involved in those protests. Also, there were some interesting people there who are sort of in the reform wing of the Orthodox Church, and then just people who'd come off the street. And when we started singing that psalm, there was, from the first opening line, there was sudden applause, and then at the end, there were quite a few people with tears in their eyes. And, you know, not having grown up in this decade, you know, my father did, so a lot of what I know is from him. I don't know the full significance of the psalm, but what I've said is my idea of why I think this is significant for people who live in the post-Soviet sphere. So, any questions?
Yes, I'm wondering, you know, Russia and the US are going through another difficult time due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and we're looking forward to better times next year. Do you think that metaphor, that's something to keep in mind here as well, or is that something that our audience might have in mind when they hear this song in the current circumstances?
Actually, I hadn't thought of that, but that is, yeah, that line about a new harvest, about a new year, yeah, that really, I think, will resonate with people right now.
Especially if I could add also the line immediately following that is that, you know what, we've had a lot of things in the past, and all of that will pass. right? Было всяко пройдет. And
Yeah.
I think that that can apply to COVID, to Putin, to, whatever. We're singing the music of a culture that has many, many, many different words for suffering.
I have a comment to make, and it's about the music. Actually, I was listening to the music as I was doing my walk, and then I came back and I was listening to the Boston Symphony performing the first Tchaikovsky symphony, and I think it was the second movement. I think maybe it was that I had the melody too much in my mind, but it was so evocative of I think it's the second movement of Tchaikovsky's Winter Dreams, First Symphony. I mean, it was just, it wasn't an exact replica, but the feeling of it and the way that the melody moved, it just struck me. I have no idea whether or not there's, anything to that, but it was noticeable.
Stefan, about 10 or 15 years ago, I had a good friend who was Russian, and she and her husband immigrated to Germany. But she was fluent in Russian, and she considered herself Russian. And they used to, when they had me over, I'd sing a bunch of the, they'd ask me to sing, and I'd sing a bunch of the standard, Kalinka, Metelitsa with no duet, and Yamshchik, Negany Loshadye, and a bunch of, Euchnyem, and a bunch of the kind of standard baritone, barittenor songs that I could do. But she would say, well, those are great, but they're all old songs. And of course, Conь is a new generation. Does it stand out, or is there another, I know it stands out, but is there another group of modern songs that we just simply are not doing? Are we getting more and more old-fashioned besides getting older?
My answer would be yes. In fact, I used to introduce the song on our tours by saying, well, this is the newest song in our repertoire. It's about, 30 years old? And that would always get a little bit of a chuckle, but not much. We have a lot of pre-revolutionary repertoire. Borodino is one of those. And that does mark our style, and in some ways it makes us stand out. So when we went to Moscow, I really tried to emphasize our link to the white emigration and our kinship with that movement, and the reason why a lot of our music is pre-revolutionary and sacred. And I think people really appreciated that. But there is some newer music, especially some of this is an example of a folk song that's not really a folk song, but there are several more that were composed in the late Soviet period that we have been missing out on.
But
yeah,
probably,
I wouldn't say.
Are there any others that move Russians in the deep way this one seems to?
There's I'm reminded of one that my landlady used to sing a lot, which was about being an old woman and having fallen in love. It's an old widow, and she's fallen in love with a man, and she says, I was young once, and I'd like to explain to my daughter, who's not old enough actually to be dating anybody. So it's her little daughter, and then she's fallen in love again, and she's sort of singing to her daughter and saying, someday you'll understand what it means to be in love. But it's an interesting twist because she's not young anymore. She's in her 40s or 50s. And
I object to that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Me too.
Stepan, can I just say something?
I'm sorry.
couple of things, if I may. First of all, I was in Russia a lot in 94, 95, 96. I was there at least once a month. And most of what you're saying was absolutely right. You know, Moscow was sort of surviving, but you went outside and it was very, very harsh. I just remember every town we went to, the thousands of dogs in the streets, just loose, and the dirt and it was really, really bad. And at the same time, you had this the series of economic, illegitimate economic activities that were going on everywhere. A load of crime, corruption, and everything else, and a small group of people getting immensely rich. So the whole place was chaotic. But on the point of view of the songs, when we went to Russia, when was it? Oh, I think I was the only one on this group that went on the tour, maybe about 10 years ago. And we sang in the conservatory, and we sang at the White Nights Festival, on the steps of the Summer Palace, and so on. And we talked a lot with the audiences. The reason we had an exception, we were received exceptionally, I mean, beyond our dreams, really. It was wonderful. But one of the reasons was because of our repertoire. Because at that time, and I think there's more of it now, but at that time, there weren't too many people remembering the very rich repertoire that we were representing. And for a lot of people, this was absolute magic. So I think we've got to be careful to make sure that we maintain our USP. Our USP is being, traditional,
So,
as opposed to modern. That's just a personal view.
well, today's focus is Conь, not the overall repertoire. So, and we've got a limited amount of time. So let's say we're focusing. I think we should have an offline discussion of what other songs would be good to include between now and our next tour. This is a good opportunity to refresh or reintroduce additional songs. But in any event, let's focus on what we need to accomplish here. Ben, why don't you take over now and lead us through the pronunciation points that you wanted to cover.
Hey, hi everybody. And for those who don't know, I'm a professor of Russian. And so although I do not have native phonetics, because I started Russian at Yale as a sophomore, sometimes I get taken for a Russian. So here we go. So my goal is, to help everybody understand what are some of the pronunciation issues with regard to vowel sounds, consonant sounds, and consonant clusters, and that you'll be able to access resources and work on your own to be able to improve your pronunciation going forward. So first, just to get a sense of vowel sounds. So I use the word vowel sounds to distinguish between the sounds and the letters. So we have a similar concept of stressed and unstressed vowels in English. So for instance, if you compare the words on each row with each other, you'll be able to recognize right away that we pronounce the vowels the sounds represented by the letters differently in each of the words on the same row. And that has to do with where the stress falls in the English words. So Russian has the same situation with dynamic stress. Stress can occur on any syllable. And so first I want to just share with you the correct pronunciation of the Russian vowel sounds represented by the Cyrillic letters in red on the slide that's on your screen right now. Ah, or, oo, Now, there among the resources that you have, there are some MP3 files that Lewis will post that will have these pronunciations, so that you can look at the slide and then listen and repeat as much as you want. I do want to make clear that the stressed sound of "o" in Russian is very much like New York and not at all totally Californian. And also with "u," in order to make that properly, if you can see me as I say it, "u," you can see that my lips are extended out from my face, "u." And if you look down, if you're doing it correctly and you look down, you should be able to see your lips. Compare the different sounds between American "oo" and Russian "oo." It's a much broader sound. E on the next slide, and then the letter "ye," as it's called, has different pronunciations based on whether it's preceded by hard and followed by a hard or a soft consonant. So when surrounded by soft consonants, it sounds more like "ye," as in "ach ты степь, бросил на беги, про день Бородина." And when it's preceded by a soft consonant and either followed by hard consonant or followed by no consonant, "е" as in больше дела, то ли мне не ягода, вот где наши матушки. And then less common in our repertoire, "a" and "e." Now, Russian has a system of rules for reducing the vowel sounds when they're not stressed. And that has an impact on the number of milliseconds of pronunciation, which may or may not be reflected in the music itself due to the meter. But it does reflect the pronunciation of the unstressed vowels for the vowels that are listed below, "a," "o," "ye," and "ya." And I do want to say that what I'm talking about right now is for Russian and not Church Slavonic, and that, that's a whole different kettle of fish. So "a" is reduced to the schwa sound, or "a," and we have that in "kalinka" and the "больше дела," except when it's when the unstressed "a" is in word initial position, as in "astronaut," the Russian word for an American astronaut. "O" is also reduced to "a," except in word initial position when it's pronounced like a stressed "a." So that's why we have "Francuzu Adana," the stress being on the last syllable in Adana, and "aganki." And examples would be from Borodino, "Москва спаленная пожаром," and "Francuzu Adana." "Ye" and "ya" are both reduced to sound like "e," and here are some examples from our repertoire, including "Конь," "Метелица метет," "Сяду я верхом на коня," "Ты неси," and "Дальних деревень." So the consonant sounds are in 3 different groups: letters that are always soft, che, sha, and i kratkaya, which I'm sorry, there's a typo and there's another one, Lewis. I'll fix it for when we post it. That i kratkaya can sometimes be represented as E, J, or Y. I'm sorry, I, J, or Y. And we have it in "Ты постой," "Красавица моя." Letters that are always hard consonant sounds, zh, sha, and tse. And the rest of the consonant letters that can be hard or soft depending on the phonetic context as described in the rules here. And for hard consonant sounds, the front of the tongue touches the front of your upper the inside of your front upper teeth. And I think that one of the most common things to hear that in clearly is in the Russian stereotype cartoon character Boris Badenov from the Bullwinkle series, who might say, "I love you, darling," right? So the L sound is hard and it's pronounced by the tip of the tongue touching the inside of your upper teeth. For soft sounds in Russian, the middle of the tongue touches, and this is very unusual for American speakers of English, The middle of the tongue touches the roof of the mouth where the hard palate borders the soft palate. So the place where we hear that is, we do have that in some words in English, and I'll illustrate. Whoops. So in this slide, you see the child's tongue, nya, 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 or the names of places like California, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. And think about, if you say the word Pennsylvania, think about where your tongue is for the first N sound in pen and where it is for the second N sound in Venya. They're in very different places. And for Russians, this is a very meaningful phonetic distinction.
And Ben, this is Tom Remington. I wanted to introduce something there and just interject something there. In our course, very often over the years, people have not always heard the distinction between the L, soft L and the hard L in something like artistique. So volia as opposed to Volga. And you might just want to point out that that's where that difference really matters.
Yeah, it actually, it's tremendously different. And if you think about Volga, and you pronounce it, the L in Volga, by putting start with Vo, or maybe just think about Vol first. And as you say Vol, make sure that the tip of your tongue touches the inside of your upper front teeth, Vol, and then add the G, Volga. But when you say Voya or Volnaya, then the L is made by the middle of your tongue touching the roof of your mouth and the middle of your mouth. Volga, Volnaya. And those sounds are, especially the L is the L sound is one of the sounds that I'll mention later is sonorant, which means that we sing on it. So sounds that are dental or fricative or labial, we pronounce them and move on. But the liquids, L and R, and actually the nasals, M and N, are sounds that we will sing on in addition to the vowel sounds. And so getting those right is more important than other consonants. So here,
in our song, we're mainly, for Konь, they're mainly soft L's, but we have Ali and Ali.
Yeah. So on this next slide, I'm going to go through and you'll hear me pronounce things differently. And I just want to remind you, there's an MP3 of every slide where I'm pronouncing things. So you can go back and practice. So at the very end of Konь, we sing the word lon, and that's a moment where the N is a sonorant, and we sing that in a prolonged way, at least under Stepan's direction in his arrangement. So I'm going to read the lines across, and you'll hear the difference between hard and soft consonants, I hope. The hard consonants are marked with red in the Cyrillic, and the soft consonants are marked with green in the Cyrillic. Lon, конь, звезд, благодать, с конем, деревень, место, только, свет, огоньки, разок, в поле, вдвоем, видать, рождает, в тебя, добрым, зарю, рассвет, дальних, брусничный, влюблен, год хлебород, бескрайнему, благодать, посмотрю, сяду, с конем, Аллы, Ади, Полюшка, коня. Now, I don't think that you have just all of a sudden memorized all these pronunciations, but you'll be able to practice with the MP3 file that will be posted to the Google Drive.
I have a question, Ben.
Mm-hmm.
You said that the aw shortens to a in word initial position.
Right.
But the word kanyom you wrote with a schwa.
It's not word initial there.
The first O is word initial.
No. The word initial letter there is ka.
Ah, got it. Okay. So it's not
Okay.
initial letter, not initial syllable. Okay. Thanks for the clarification.
Sure. So Russian also has a systematic difference between voiced and voiceless consonant sounds, which is common to many Indo-European languages, maybe all, but since I don't know them all, I'm not going to go out on the limb on that one. So I'd just like to ask everybody to feel the difference between voiced and voiceless consonant sounds. Take the palm of your hand right now and put it on your throat. And then in the middle bullet, pronounce after me. I won't hear you, but su, zoo.
Su, zoo.
Ash, azure.
Ash, azure.
Fan, van.
Fan, van.
Now the difference between those sounds is only whether your vocal cords vibrate. So everything else about those sounds in terms of what's going on with your tongue and your mouth and your lips is the same. The only feature that varies is the vibration of the vocal cords. When the vocal cords vibrate, they're voiced consonant sounds. When they don't, they're voiceless consonant sounds. In English, I can't tell what kind of system we have or how to mark that. If you look on the last bullet, the words was and bus both have S at the end, but they're pronounced differently. Russian has a system. So in this slide, you see the chart of all the paired consonants that are voiced and voiceless. And in parentheses are the English equivalents, the best I could do for you. There are some consonants that are always voiced. They're in the top line, and some consonants that are always voiceless. And these always voiced, they don't have a voiceless mate. The always voiceless don't have voiced mates. And the key thing is that there's a system. So word final voiced consonants are pronounced as voiceless. So в поле звезд, вдруг. And our wonderful conductor, Sveshnikov, his last name. So the last letter of his last name is V, pronounced with an F. Voiced consonants followed by a voiceless consonant are also pronounced as voiceless. So my last name, Rifkin, бескрайнему, the Z followed by a K. And this pattern holds for prepositions followed by a word beginning with a that shouldn't be soft consonant, I'll fix that, voiceless consonant, в поле. Voiceless consonants followed by a voiced consonant are pronounced as voiced. And that's why французу отдана sounds like it has just a D in it, no T. And вся Россия is pronounced like an F, not a V. Вся Россия. But it's not. So the consonant sounds that our audiences notice are the sonorants that are listed here in English letters. And we sometimes sing through a note or draw out these sounds, as in kudravy lyon, near the end of Конь. So we have to know how to make this sound, whether it's hard or soft. And lyon, N is hard, lyon. So it's being pronounced with the tongue close to touching the inside of the front upper teeth. So the last thing I was asked to address was the consonant clusters and strategies as an American learner of Russian for how to pronounce these consonant clusters. And I just want to reassure everyone that there are consonant clusters in English that Russians find very difficult, or speakers of every other language. Apparently, I don't know if we have anybody who's a native speaker of German in our group today, but the word squirrel is apparently extremely difficult for German speakers to say. So things like threat, that's a big mouthful for Russians. So a couple of the consonant clusters, some strategies are to take the first consonant in the cluster, and in your head, think about it as following the vowel at the end of the previous word. So papoliu vdvayom, stick in your head, stick the va after the u sound. Papoliu vdvayom. Some of the things that are challenging for American speakers of Russian are the sound z followed by another consonant, because we don't do that too often. So you might want to practice zyost and zlataya. And also the F sound followed by a consonant, vpolya, vpolya. And we definitely don't want to introduce any silence or pause in between a consonant that is a preposition and the word that follows. And in this song, we have that in the phrase vpolya, into the meadow, vpolya. In Russian, it's actually written as two words with the letter v pronounced like an F, which means in or into, vpolya, pronounced as one sound, vpolya, and skanyom, with the horse, skanyom, and is the preposition with. So if there are consonant clusters you find impossible, you can, skip the initial sound. Just sing the consonant nearest the vowel. As long as enough members of the chorus are singing all of the consonant sounds, the audience isn't going to notice. So don't get too upset about that. Among the resources that we have, Stepan has made a wonderful video where he's reciting the text of Conь very slowly, pausing between each line. Now, when native speakers of Russian do that, sometimes they emphasize vowels that are reduced. So Stepan followed my request to slow down so that it would be easier for you to follow. And he and I talked about how there are two errors in the recording, and where when Russians want to tell you how something is spelled, they'll pronounce it as if every vowel is fully stressed. So those two errors are marked here: благодать, grace, благодать, and место, place. Notice the schwa in the transliteration. So now I created an Audacity file. Audacity is a free software you can download, and Lewis will provide you the information about that, which shows the sound waves and it's Stepan's recording. And I labeled every stanza and the beginning of every line. So watch it once to see within the MP4 file, so you see his lovely face, and watch his lips. And then you can use the Audacity file to practice certain lines that you want to practice again and again, because it'll be easy for you to find it, because each line is marked with a few words that begin it, and each stanza is marked, so you can skip to the section you want really easily.
And why don't I show them that now so they know what we're talking about? If you unshare, and then I will share, and then I'll bring it up.
There we go.
Okay, so couple things while I'm here. So the video that Ben was talking about is up on YouTube. And so you can see here, it's a little bit dark, but you can see Stepan reciting the text.
Выйду ночью в поле с конем.
And if we now go to the Audacity file, so here you see Audacity. Here is the audio file which Ben has marked up, and so you can select the particular phrase that you would like to hear, and then you can play that.
Выйду ночью в поле с конем.
So if you have any questions about pronunciation anywhere, you can zero in on the particular stanza and the particular phrase.
And if I could also say, you can also just play this through.
Absolutely.
Right? You don't have to select a section and just listen to that section. You can just play it through. Lewis put in the chat the Audacity download. It works on Mac and Windows platforms. It also, I mean, it's handy for sound editing. By looking at the labels that you see underneath the sound waves, the visuals of the sound waves, you can see where I marked stanza 1 and then the first word or two of each line. So if you go to a label, and Lewis, why don't you do that on your screen?
Yeah, so I'm here, I've selected stanza 2.
So that tells you where it begins. And if you click on Siado Ya.
And now, would you like me to play that?
Sure.
Сяду я верхом на коня.
So you click on the label, you find exactly that spot. And I just want to remind everybody that at the end of the score, you have the Russian text, the transliteration, and the translation. So you can use that to find your way through the Audacity file.
And also, I've posted, or we will post these to a Google folder in the YRCAA Google Drive. I will send a link around to that afterwards. Anyone who does not have access to that, I'll be happy to give them access to it. So basically any video material we've posted to YouTube, so it's easy to get. And then everything else you'll need to go to the Google folder to get access.
So what I'd like to do before I wrap up my part is just to ask if you have any questions about the pronunciation.
I have a question, Ben.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes when I sing, for example, the word zlataya, I would always say it as a real cluster, just zlataya.
Yeah.
But sometimes when I sing, I do the French, you know how French singing sort of pronounces things that aren't pronounced in, you know, like Edith Piaf or whatever. So I will, if I'm singing zlataya, I might add an almost an unvoiced vowel, zlataya, zlataya, and give myself just a little more space, especially if it's in the slow part. How do you view that sort of trick?
I'm fine with it as a trick. I do want to point out that in this very song, we have the word zalataya and zlataya. And these two words are manifestations of an important distinction in Russian vocabulary between Russian and words that are Slavonic in origin. And so zlataya has, zlataya is the Slavonic. Some of you may have noticed in some songs we have the word gorod, and in other songs we have grad, as in Leningrad or Stalingrad, Volgograd. It's the same kind of thing going on. And when there's more vowels involved, it's the Russian, and when it's without one of those vowels, it's the Slavonic, and the Slavonic conveys a meaning of more abstract, more high-powered. So zlataya becomes, the difference in meaning for me, and Stepan, you're the native speaker, so you might not sense this, but for me, zlataya is an everyday golden. And zlataya is somehow golden and sacred and special. And
yes, that's how I feel.
So just the omission of the vowel there makes that difference. And I think that Russians feel that, in terms of not necessarily being able to explain it, because that's something that not every Russian has the education to be able to explain that, but they feel it intuitively. If you ask me, why do I use the word the in this phrase, but not in that one? I can't explain it. I can just say, here the word the is needed and it's correct, and here it can't be used and it's incorrect. And that's just because I'm a native speaker and I can't explain it. But linguists write books about the usage of the definite articles in English. And it's one of the most challenging things for native speakers of Russian and Chinese to figure out.
I have a question, Ben. Charlie Keefe. In the transcription of the lyrics following the score, that is extremely helpful, where Papolyu Zvayom is repeated in the first stanza and also in the second stanza, it tells us with the accents to pronounce Papolya, po palyu once, and then back to the, to me, more likely pronunciation Papolyu. Is that intentional?
Yes, one is Papolyu and one is Popolyu. And that's just two different phonetic possibilities in Russian, stress possibilities. I don't sense any difference in meaning, Stepan, do you? I think there's this musical meter going on here.
There's no difference in meaning, but Popolyu is how your old granny from the village would say it. Because she would be more likely to pronounce her O's as if they were Church Slavonic. Popolyu. So she'd put the stress there.
I'd like to add something. I'm not nearly as good a Russian speaker as you guys, but I have had to coach a choir a couple of times doing some classical Russian music. And you mentioned earlier about the things an audience hears, a Russian audience hears, and there is nothing more outstanding that a Russian audience hears wrong than when English singers sing "oh" with a diphthong instead of "aw." The Russian "aw" sound, and we have it in the second line of the second stanza, "Polya nikovo nie vidать," elsewhere, and if you say "oh" anywhere, if you diphthong that "oh," it just smashes the ear to a Russian speaker.
Yeah, that's what I was saying in the beginning about "or" and not totally. And I would add to that the American "oo," the American "oo" sound. Now, this particular song is, I would say, phonetically colored by "ah" and "or." There isn't nearly as much "e," "yeah." It's definitely "ah" and "or," which, for me, this is just wild on my part to say this. I'm sorry. This is based on nothing linguistic. But to me, that the breadth of the "ah" and "or" connote the vastness of the steppes of Russia and that sense of expanse.
Sense of awe.
Sense of awe.
Sense of awe. There you go. It's awesome. That
was awful.
Does that resonate with you?
That was my wife's fault. That was Dana sitting here did that.
Stepan, does that resonate with you at all?
I don't know. I mean, not really.
Okay. But I think that if you count the vowel sounds in the two categories of ah, or, and e, and yeah, you'll find that the tone is much more ah and or throughout the song. So these are
Ben or Stefan, would one of you say those two, where one is po and one is pop? Would you say those so that we can hear the difference? Because I'm trying to say it in my mind and I can't.
Papolyu.
Say the whole lines. The whole lines. As though you were singing it.
Yeah, hold on a minute.
Мы пойдем с конем.
Мы пойдем с конем по полю вдвоем. Мы пойдем с конем по полю вдвоем.
But that's not the rhythm.
Мы пойдем с конем по полю вдвоем. Мы пойдем с конем по полю вдвоем.
I can sing this line too. Мы пойдем с конем по полю вдвоем. Мы пойдем с конем по полю вдвоем.
Okay, thank you.
So we've got some people who need to leave now, and rest assured we are recording this. So if you have to leave early and miss it, you can view it later. So Ben, any other pronunciation issues? I'd like to talk through the music expression a bit.
Sensible.
The only thing I have to say is if there's any other questions for me, I just want to remind everybody that, feel free to email me. I'm just a reminder of my email address in the chat.
Ben, do you not get quite enough emails?
I don't. I lay awake at night thinking, if only I could get more email. Thanks, everybody. Louis, you're up.
Okay, so I have a suggestion, Stepan. I have the score coming up. So why don't oh shoot, put that away. We'll come back. Why don't, let's just sort of look through it, and if there's anything that you want to highlight and discuss in the score, then stop me and we'll talk about it, okay?
Yeah, well, let's see, the beginning. Blend really matters here. This is going to be possibly one of the hardest parts because we have to sing in unison, but we can't really hear each other. So at the beginning, where this is basically plain chant or, just a single folk melody, make sure that you are perfectly in tune with the piano recording. Because we aren't using auto tune, and we need to be able to blend there. It's soft but supported throughout, and then the parts layer on, and the volume increases kind of naturally when we're all singing together. Since we're recording individually, you may want to realize, oh, another part's coming in. Let me just add a little bit more intensity as it gets louder. Then we have this nice duet going on. Then the trio, probably keep going, Louis. Our first real dynamic contrast is "Сяду я верхом на коня," and that's marked in the text with a nice fortissimo. And I think, yeah, we really do mean fortissimo here. So don't be afraid to just belt it right out. "Сяду я верхом на коня," and that intensity is going to stay through this section. With the typical phrasing, don't forget about phrasing, and then we'll come down in dynamics at the end of this section.
Is my thinking.
So let's see, here we scroll through.
Peak crescendo there.
Then we have a subito piano.
That's right, I missed the subito piano, so we do have that. So how does this, I'm sorry, где рождает поле зарю, we're still a nice fortissimo. Али есть аль брусничный цвет алый да рассвет, give that a nice lift. Али да рассвет, али есть, and whisper that али есть то место, али его нет. And then give it back to a nice mezzo forte or just a fuller sound, and no subito piano the second time. That subito piano helps us come down to a reasonable volume. Then this nice hum, and back to the simple mezzo piano feeling of the beginning, where there's a unison line now in the tenors with a drone in the lower voices, which goes to, it fills out into 4-part harmony. Don't overdo that. The 4-part harmony will take care of giving that a fuller sound. I do try to make sure that we feel the difference between the really simple plain chant, which I keep calling it plain chant. It's not chant, of course, but the simple unison melody, which doesn't take much extra coloring. You just sing it the way you would sing a lullaby. And then when it fills out into 4-part, we really want to have more of a covered, full, supported sound that helps change that tone.
Question at measure 45, how much bass low C do you want there?
Well, as much as you can do while sounding like you're singing and not, I don't know, a machine gun or.
Right. So people who have a nice low C sing it, don't feel like you have to gut it out.
No, give that a nice, yeah, that'll hopefully sound impressive. That's so impress us. Золотая рожь да кудрявый лен. This is, mezzo piano, mezzo forte. Я влюблен в тебя, Россия, влюблен. Be careful. I actually banned the basses from singing this because I was having too many. That's why there's a reason that the basses don't sing this. They refused to blend and they refused to sing in tune.
Oh.
And so I said, I was only going to have the baritones sing it. And Louis, if the baritones don't blend, we're going to make it a solo.
Okay.
And
we'll
then we have
in the editing room. Okay.
Yeah. And then we have now it's a triple forte, which, pretty much goes to the end, except there's that subito close to a hum right in the last few measures. So it's dynamically, it's pretty simple. And the three parts that we have is the opening, plain singing, unison blend. That's really, don't overdo it. Just sing it straight. And then a nice full mezzo sound that we're going to have in a few places, where I just want a covered, supported, mild vibrato sound. And then these anything that's marked fortissimo or more, that's our Cossack sound. That's where we want to belt, well, retaining control, obviously, but give your nice Cossack, what would this be that we sing? Soldatushki type of thing, but without shouting.
How much tenor descant do you want, Stepan?
I think we need to contact a couple people individually to ask them. So sing the tenor part as written unless you hear otherwise.
Fair enough.
The lower.
Meaning the middle stave?
No, there a few select tenors will go up a third at the.
I know. Stefan, I'm asking, do you want, unless we're told otherwise, you want us to sing not the descant?
Correct. Don't sing the descant unless you hear.
Because I listened to the 65th anniversary recording, and you really need to make sure you have some strong singers on each of those three tenor parts, because it's not there in the recording.
Yeah. I will.
Particularly the lower of the three voices. But the middle too.
The tenor twos.
Yeah, everyone's doing blastissimo, really, or trying to.
Oh, Joe, important comment actually. Joe, I don't know if I can read your comment. I know it said something about fortissimo. Do you want to just tell us instead of me trying to interpret it?
Give me a minute.
So if anyone feels like they want to send in more than one tenor part, you're welcome to do it. It's one of the advantages of being virtual is you can clone yourself. And we've been a little bit weak on the first tenor side in some of our recordings. So get we'd like as much first tenor as we can get for this.
My comment, if you still want to hear it, is that I've participated in several of these projects with other groups, and that it's different from singing in a concert hall. You cannot have the same range, especially in the fortissimo, and forte. It has to be conveyed more in intensity of the voice rather than loudness, because otherwise you blow out the microphone. So I don't know if Lewis or someone else wants to demonstrate that at some point, but the idea is that there has to be a range, otherwise it's boring, but it can't be what we would do in Woolsey Hall. And yes, I've listened to some of what other groups do and us. And as was pointed out by someone else, blastissimo sounds terrible in a concert hall and even worse on a video recording. So we want to avoid that sound.
I wrote in blastissimo. Maybe we can remove that.
Pointed out that when you're doing a studio recording, you're singing to the microphone in front of you. We're all used to singing to the rafters, and that's not what we're doing here. You're singing to this microphone that's just a foot or two away from you. So you don't want to go outside volume of what makes sense in really what is an intimate recording setting. Anything else here?
It's really tricky. That's why I didn't get the kind of intensity I wanted on the Georgian.
Question from the Peanut Gallery. Stepan, are there any notes changed since the 65th? In other words, anything we should be looking out for as we're comparing to what we're hearing in our ear?
I don't think any notes have changed.
Since I edited the score, I'll tell you that the notes have not changed. The note values have changed in a few places. So we marked in rests where we want people to actually cut off. Now, there are other places where you should take a breath. If you listen to the piano recording, all the Luftpausen are in there. But in the score, there are particular places where we added rests that you didn't see in the 65th score.
Can I ask, when we get a conductor tape to follow for the recording, to listen to on headphones, I assume, Stepan, there'll be some indication of dynamics. You know, you'll be giving some sense of making it bigger or being quiet, something that we can follow. Is that correct?
That's right.
Great. I mean, that'll be a huge help.
Okay, anything else from the score, or shall we move on, Stepan?
I think that's good enough. And, you know, if I think of anything else, I will attach it to the notes for the conductor video when that goes out.
Okay. All right. Well, we're running late here. I don't want to hold people longer than absolutely necessary. Let's just review the schedule here. So, Stepan, when are you envisioning doing the conductor recording so we can plan the singer recordings accordingly?
So like I told you just before this call, these next 2 weeks are going to be pretty busy. I'm going into some finals for school. And I'd prefer to get it out late December and then have recordings coming in the first 2 weeks of January. If that works for you.
Andrew Scott, you're on the line. Could you weigh in here? Given the student calendar, what makes sense in terms of getting recordings done? Andrew is muted. He'll unmute shortly. I just want to make sure we're not messing Yale students up because of the way that the COVID is messing up the calendar. Let's see, I'll ask Andrew to unmute.
If I remember correctly, they are having a longer winter break than usual and starting at the end of January. So hopefully this would be perfect, but I'll wait for him to confirm.
I can also speak to that as a current Yale student. So we do have break until February 1st. So I think that schedule actually will work quite well for people. And we have final exams ending December 18th. So after that is ideal for recording.
Okay. Well, we'll plan accordingly then. So get the recordings in January, and we'll get it all finalized by the end of January. Make sense, everybody?
Yep.
Okay, good. So just one last thing before we go I'm going to share my screen one more time. And just a reminder to everybody, the YRCAA YouTube channel, if you don't visit it, you should visit it during this period. We've put together a set of Conь study materials, and we'll be adding to this as they come. We won't necessarily send out email announcements whenever we post a new recording. We'll certainly let everyone know when the conductor recording is up. But the best thing is just to check the channel to make sure that you've got the most current stuff. And then the other files, the Audacity files, the MP3, we will put into a Google folder and share that with y'all. Any final questions or comments before we break? Okay, I guess we're good then. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. Good luck. Let's put together a good recording that impresses our Russian audience. I think they'll be looking forward to hearing this.
Louis, thanks so much to
Nicely
you
done,
and to
everybody.
Stepan and everybody for being so helpful. Yeah,
Very good.
very helpful.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody.
Very good.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Well, everyone.
After that.